Over just the last week, we have seen record-setting heat waves in Florida. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, just announced they expect to see the worst hurricane season since potentially 2005, which brought us Katrina.
Meanwhile,
Well, that sounds like a very intelligent, well thought out thing to do. Hey y'all, it's Becky here from the Beccasphere, where we talk about climate change and the clean energy transition. If those sound like interesting and important topics to you, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss every single time I post. Let's start with a summary of Florida's position in the climate change and clean energy conversations before we get into the new bill, aptly named Don't Say Climate Bill, and how it will impact the state's trajectory moving forward. So most insurance companies have pulled out of Florida due to increasingly disastrous extreme weather events. Florida is already experiencing increasingly strong hurricanes, deadly hot days, and more sunny day flooding from sea level rise. And it's not helping curb climate change, ranking third in carbon emissions in 2021 after Texas and California. At the same time, Florida also ranked third in solar energy generation in 2021. Also after Texas and California. Florida could easily run on solar and offshore wind, which would create more than 300,000 jobs and save the average Floridian more than $300 on their energy bill a year, but instead it gets 74% of its energy from the methane belching gas as of 2022 numbers. Now, before Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis passed this bill, there was something he didn't do that we should talk about first. He potentially lost Florida more than $500 million in funding by not submitting a state climate action plan to qualify for the Climate Pollution Reduction Grants program. States that submit the plan, which every state did except for Florida, Iowa, Kentucky, South Dakota, and Wyoming, get an initial $3 million to go towards projects that can reduce greenhouse gases and can later qualify for an additional $500 million more for those projects. By opting out of the program, DeSantis just gave away the tax dollars his state's residents have already paid to other states. Now, there is a way for cities to qualify for the program, and 5 metropolitan areas in Florida did receive around $1 million because they individually submitted their climate action plans to qualify. But any Floridian that's not a part of those metropolitan areas, which I'll list on the screen because I'm not saying them all, unfortunately are shit out of luck. DeSantis did something similar to this a couple times, actually. Starting in last year, he opted out of $320 million to reduce vehicle emissions. That money could have gone towards expanding the state's electric vehicle charging network, bike lanes, or public transit, but oh well, I guess. He also rejected $346 million in federal funds to help Floridians make their homes more energy efficient, something that the state legislature actually begged DeSantis to accept, but nah. And yet Ron formed a $1.8 billion Resilient Florida program in 2021 to help communities prepare for sea level rise and more intense storms and flooding. So I guess the plan is to just adjust your way out of climate change. I don't think the keys are going to survive that strategy. And that leads me into this latest move. Florida's state government will no longer be required to consider climate change in its energy policies starting July 1st. It actually sounds more like DeSantis specifically wants Florida to pick the least climate-friendly options moving forward. The new law bans the construction of offshore wind turbines in state waters, reduces regulations for gas pipelines, repeals state grant programs that encourage energy conservation and renewable energy adoption, and removes requirements for state agencies to pick the least polluting products and vehicles. It even blocks any municipality or homeowner association from restricting its use of gas stoves. So, like, if any parent has an issue with the gas stoves being linked to cancer, for example, too bad. How very free choice of you, Ron. The only clean energy that benefits from the plan is nuclear. Nuclear energy accounts for about 12% of Florida's power, and the bill asks the state government to look into the technological and economic feasibility of using advanced nuclear power technology in the future. The bill also shows preference towards developing hydrogen, specifically hydrogen vehicle infrastructure. Side note, and maybe I'll make a future video on this, though I did actually make a video a long time ago on hydrogen, so I guess check that out. I don't know the quality of that video, but I mean, the quality of the information I'm sure is good. The quality of the video itself, I don't know. Because hydrogen mainly comes as a byproduct from fossil fuel extraction right now, it's basically just one of big oil's plans to stay relevant in the future. Because hydrogen's such a small molecule, it leaks really easily. And even though it's not a greenhouse gas itself, it's been found to bind with molecules in the atmosphere that otherwise would neutralize methane, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. So leaking is bad. So prioritizing hydrogen vehicle infrastructure over electric vehicles is really nonsensical. Just to clarify a little bit here, I don't think that hydrogen has no use or potential. I think it could be very useful in decarbonizing some hard to decarbonize sectors, like parts of the industrial sector. But when it comes to using hydrogen instead of using other technologies that are more proven, or using the excuse of building more pipelines for natural gas, saying, oh, we'll just switch it to hydrogen in the future. That's an example of where hydrogen's really just being used to further the existence of big oil, and it's not necessary. Public utilities could still petition to voluntarily develop EV charging programs, but it won't be supported from the state like hydrogen infrastructure seems like it will. After signing the bill, along with 2 others, DeSantis wrote on X, quote, "The legislation I signed today will keep windmills off our beaches, gas in our tanks, and China out of our state. We're restoring sanity in our approach to energy and rejecting the agenda of the radical green zealots. Furthermore, we're going to ensure foreign adversaries like China have no foothold in our state." I mean, President Biden already set stricter tariffs on China for specifically the clean energy industry before this, so you're not really doing anything except hindering American industries. But what do you think about this move in Florida? Let me know, especially if you live in the state. A Floridian who couldn't help but say something about it was NBC's South Florida meteorologist Steve McLaughlin.
On Thursday, we reported on NBC6 News that the government of Florida was beginning to roll back really important climate change legislation and really important climate change language, in spite of the fact that the state of Florida over the last couple of years has seen record heat, record flooding, record rain, record insurance rates, and the corals are dying all around the state. The entire world is looking to Florida to lead in climate change, and our government is saying that climate change is no longer the priority it once was. Please keep in mind, the most powerful climate change solution is the one you already have in the palm of your hands, the right to vote. And we will never tell you who to vote for, but we will tell you this. We implore you to please do your research and know that there are candidates that believe in climate change and that there are solutions, and there are candidates that don't.
Florida's move will probably set an unfortunate precedent for other red states to follow. One state that I do have my eye on right now, which I guess is technically a purple state, but you know, looks increasingly red every day, is Arizona. And that's because of a TikTok by Wisco Project.
Because the mainstream media can't do their job, I'm breaking this story myself. Arizona is about to ban the study of climate change by public universities and government agencies. And I'm not even slightly exaggerating, this is the whole bill. Not only would they make it illegal to collect carbon emission data, they would ban acknowledging that climate change is man-made, and they'd even ban advocating for a climate action plan. And this is in a state that's seeing hundreds of additional heat fatalities every year. And if this bill passes, it'll even be illegal to study how to reduce those fatalities. Though I should really say when, not if. Because the bill already sailed through the state Senate with ubiquitous support from the party behind it. Now it has to go through the state House, where that same group has a small but very loyal majority. But what's crazy is that many of the people behind this bill only won their elections by a point or two. Seriously, 1 measly percent could have prevented all of this. So the next time someone tells you that your vote doesn't matter, that both parties are the same, don't listen to them, at least if you care about climate change.
It sounds like the Arizona bill would be as wide-reaching as the headlines made the Florida bill sound. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Florida bill is very detrimental. But when I first saw the headlines, I thought that it completely took out climate change from all the discussions, not just energy decisions, but like also education, weather monitoring, and resiliency measures. Thankfully, DeSantis can't seem to go so far as to pretend that his state doesn't need to prepare for more extreme climate. He just doesn't care how much his state contributes to the problem. So it's like shoveling water out of a boat without fixing the hole. The Arizona bill would prevent public entities like universities or cities from being able to spend money to reduce, for example, animal product consumption and promoting plant-based diets. It would also limit their ability to spend money towards walkability and public transit over personal motor vehicles, or promoting electric vehicles, or encouraging the reduction of plane travel, limiting the number of articles of clothing an individual can produce. That's kind of random. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions, tracking greenhouse gas emissions, adopting a climate action plan altogether, or promoting a circular economy. There's also other weird ones in there, like promoting Marxist ideology, so I'm sure there is no conspiratorial thinking in the writing of this bill. It also restricts funding from any public entity if it considers race or gender identity in its hiring practices, because of course we have to throw some anti-equity practices in there too. And it also encourages any Arizonan to sue a public entity that tries to do anything like these things I mentioned. So wild stuff overall. Arizona's governor, Katie Hobbs, would likely veto this bill if it passes the Senate, but the state Congress could reject the veto with a 2/3 majority. So something to keep your eye on. What other states have you seen push back on clean energy recently? Or what states have you seen doing a great job? Let's hear some good news in the comment section below. It's now time for a fun fact about Rue. So Rue's Gotcha Day was recently. It was middle of May. And so I thought I'd tell you a little bit about how we found Rue. Notably, he was found on the side of the road with 11 other siblings. They were recently seemingly dumped there, as seen by some dry cat food just dumped next to them. And my brother and our friend found them when they were on their way to visit me in Oregon. They stopped off in Shasta, and that's where they found all the kittens. So what would you do with 12 kittens that you just found? Well, they decided to take 6, and another couple that came over to see what they were doing also took 6 kittens. And they drove the 6 kittens that they grabbed up the rest of the way to Oregon. And so most of Rue's 6 siblings that we got to hang out with, which were 5 boys and a girl, all live in Oregon except for Rue. So he's the only Californian boy. And that was a fun fact about Rue. Until next time, remember to talk about the climate crisis every single day and to support your local news and environmental organizations. Thank you to the people on Patreon who help support me and my fur baby Rue. A special shout out to the climate confident and courageous David H., Paul B., Phil Plasma, Dan Morton, Specker, Breezy, Deanne, Kevin Morton, SKP Joe's Coursegold, and Gary Stark. I greatly appreciate your support of $5 or more. If you would like to support the work I do, please check out the Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links in the description below for reoccurring or one-time payments. Bye for now.